Okay, so last week we were ending with Shemot, known as Exodus 21:4, which said, if the Lord gives him, speaking of his servant, his indentured servant, a woman, and sons or daughters are born, the woman and her offspring shall belong to her Lord, and he, speaking of the servant, will go out with nothing but the clothes on his back, because remember, with back he is a Hebrew idiom. All right. Now we said some things and talked about what Rashi said and some of those things, but here's what it boils down to. This was a woman, not a wife. Did I read that as wife a while ago? A woman. Okay. This is a woman and not a wife. So if he gives this man a woman, remember the first thing we had to understand was she was not actually given to him. She was handed over into his authority, which means she was probably there to cook and clean for him. Because this would be for a servant that was higher up, maybe a servant who's running the farm or running the estate or whatever. And so he's going to have, could be a personal secretary. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why a woman would be turned over into his authority. But things happen sometimes and children are born, right? So here's the thing, the woman didn't belong to the guy. She wasn't his wife, because if the man wants to make the woman his wife, he has to purchase her. Remember, the wife has to be purchased, and this man did not purchase this woman. She was given into his authority. In other words, she was there to serve him. And he took it a little further. They took it a little too far, and she gets pregnant. Well, she still doesn't belong to him. So if she wants, if he wants her to be his wife, and she wants to be his wife, because remember, in the Jewish world, the woman had to be agreeable. If she was not agreeable, she was not attached to this guy. So if the two of them wanted to get married, well, then he could purchase her. That may cost him another 6 years of working to pay for the wife, and particularly the child, if there's a child born at the union. Of course, once they're married, doesn't matter how many more children are born, except that he's now going to be responsible for feeding them. But remember, this is indentured servitude, so he is getting a check. He should be able to cover that. So he would have to purchase the woman. Now, if he hadn't purchased her and she has his child, he also has to purchase the child. That's This was a good deterrent to remind a man to keep his hands off, if you know what I'm saying. Because she wasn't there for that purpose. All right, so we begin today with Shemot, or Exodus 21:5. In English, it literally would say, and if, he say, the servant, I will love me, lord me, wife me, and child my, not go out free me. Right? So it's like, oh, that doesn't even make sense when it's literal. If you really got the literal Hebrew, you pretty much wouldn't, a literal translation of the Hebrew, you pretty much never understand it. But let's work through this. So ve'im, and if, amor, and if somebody has to say something, the primary signification is to bear forth, to bring something to light, to shed light on the subject, right? So someone says, Yomar, okay, so if he says, ha'eved, and the he is who? The servant. Remember, the servant in this case is not somebody who is outright owned by a master. He has made a contract with another man. That man is now his, they call master, and he's the servant. That's the relationship between them. It is just like somebody joining the Air Force or the Army or the Marines. You become an indentured servant. They are your master. You are the servant. So if you get a sunburn, a really bad sunburn, we covered this last week, and you can't do your work, you can be court-martialed, because you are literally, during the years you signed up for, doesn't matter if you signed up for 2 years, 4 years, or beyond, those years that you have signed up for, you literally belong to the government. You are their property. And so if you destroy their property, if that's destruction of government property. That's what you get uh, court-martialed for if they decide to do that. So this is indentured servitude. You got to make sure you understand that. This man is the master, this other man is the servant. So speaking of the servant, if he says ahabti, ahab, you hear love, desire to breathe after anything, the signification of breathing after, hence of longing for, I long for. If he says, I long for this woman, I love her, right? At Adoni, if he says to his Lord, now Adoni is the word for Lord. So if he says the master, the possessor, the owner, if you will, at Ishti, so says woman me, really, or can be wife me. Ishti is used of both. It's of a woman, whether she's married or unmarried. A woman as opposed to a man, right? Ve'et banai. And my children, because he's accepting the responsibility. These are my children, or this is my child, this is my son, this is my daughter, whatever the case may be. Lo et zeh. So I will not go out. Remember, at the 7th year, he is supposed to go out. The servant is supposed to be let loose regardless if there's any money owed or anything accrued during that time. The person who made the deal with him has to forgive all that debt. There's just no debt that can be attached to this man. And so he's saying, I won't go out. I love this woman. I love my master, my servant, or my Lord, whatever you want to call it. I will not go out hafashi. I will not go out free. So the translation of Shemot 21:5 is, and if the servant adamantly says, because remember, it's that Amor Yemor, Yomer, whatever it was. So it's, if he says, when you say it twice, what is that? That's makes it more important. That's emphasis. And so if the servant adamantly says, I will love my wife, I will love her, because in Hebrew, remember, the future tense is ongoing. There's never going to come a time when I won't love this woman. I will love my Lord, I will love my wife and my child, and will not go out free. I won't do this. See, this is the price that he is now paying for the woman to become his wife and the child to become his child. He's now going to be a forever servant. The exception to the rule was obviously given for men whose relationship was more than just casual. You see what we're saying here. This wasn't a casual fling. Something happened, and he doesn't care that she and the child goes back to the Lord. This is, the guy fell in love with the woman, and obviously the woman loves him because she has say so in this. Which we haven't reached that law yet, but we will see that she has say so in this. So if he wants her to be his wife and she wants to be his wife and he wants to raise those children with her, then he has that right, but that's the price he has to pay for that right. Again, a deterrent for a man to keep his hands off if he doesn't want to get into that kind of situation. So now we move on to verse 6. The literal English is, and bring he, Lord his, to the gods, and bring he to the door or to the door posts, and pierce Lord his at ear he. Oh, at. That should be an arrow. It's a pointer. I put the Hebrew word in there. Ear he, and owl. How do we say that? All, yeah, AWL, and servant he forever. Okay, so it starts off with the he gisho. So someone's going, and bring ye is literally what it is, to draw near, to approach any person or thing, especially to come near to Yahweh instead of his priests, to approach the altar, come near to anything is to reach it. You get the idea. It means the same thing that we think of when it's to draw near to somebody. It must be remarked that the ancients, as well as, this is a note I found in there, it must be remarked that the ancients, as well as ourselves, were not strictly accurate in the use of words which signify approaching and withdrawing. and thus they are sometimes used of the direct contrary motion. I've said this before. The word bo in Hebrew is come here or go there. We have a hard time thinking of it that way in English because if I'm going to the store, I come to the store or I went to the store. Both are true. If I come to the store, then I have arrived at the store because I went to the store. If I go from the store to my home, then I come to my home because I went from the store to my home. So to come and to go are exactly the same thing in Hebrew. You can find this in the African dialects today. They still say that. I come to the store means they're going to the store. I come to my house means they're going to their house. And Hebrew is no exception. It was that way in Hebrew. So there are some languages that do that. We separate that out in English. I either come or I go. But in Hebrew, to come and to go is used, they use the same word. Then it says Adonai, which is his Lord. That's the master, that's the possessor, that's the guy who literally owns him for that certain period of time. And his Lord is going to now, after he goes through this ceremony, is going to own him from now on. By the way, he still had to pay the owner still had to pay the servant a set fee. He got a salary, he got money to spend. But in this case, the owner now has to provide the servant a home to live in and food to eat and clothes to wear. So the indentured servant had to provide his own home, his own food, and his own place to live. But now that he is the actual owned servant, he gets actually more than the indentured servant did. Anyway, El is to Ha Elohim. You hear Elohim, right? That's usually God. But Ha Elohim here is the judges. It's use of God, and it's in plural. It's of the majesty of God. It's used of any god or gods of, like false gods. They use the word Elohim for that. But they also use the word Elohim for self-confident men, for obstinate men, for a man who despises God and confides in his own strength and his own sword. Those guys were called gods. Men of renown, leaders of the people were called Elohim. It's just a generic word. They were, in fact, called gods. Psalm 82:1 used of angels and judges. Or Psalms 82:1, I'm not sure which one that is. Also once applied to king. Yeah. So it's a king is called a god in Psalm 82:1. But it's used of angels, if you believe in that sort of thing, and of course the judges, as I've said. It's from the root Allah. Does that sound good? Because that's the name of a false god. And the thing that we need to know about that is it's to be thick, to be fat of the abdomen, to have a big belly, to have a big butt. Because in this period of time, back in the Second Temple period, and then coming this direction to the 6 to the 900s, where the Muslim religion came about, only the wealthy could have a big belly and a fat butt. Do you follow what I'm saying? Because the average person and the poor person didn't have a lot of food. They spent their whole day, every day, looking for one meal. Where the rich person could just gorge himself, right? So he'd wind up with a fat belly and a fat butt. And that showed prominence. It showed wealth. It showed power and authority. And so when the Muslim religion it came about, they named their god Allah, the fat butt god, because that was the ultimate power and authority in their culture back then. They get really upset if you take it back to that now. But I don't understand it either. I don't understand why they don't own that, because of what it meant when they came up with the name. I've probably said all that needs to be said about that. The Higi show, now we've already had this, and bring he. So he's going to draw near the servants in the Lord are going to draw near to the gods. They're going to draw near to the leaders. And so he's going to bring the Lord is going to bring this servant ha delet to the door. Delet, that's door. That's it's a door. It's even a gate. It's just something that swings on hinges. This is O, just like OH, O, how we would pronounce it in English, but that means or. So he's going to bring him to the doors, or he's going to bring him to Hamezuzah, or to the doorpost. It just, in different places, they're not going to want you, pounding nails through the door. Do it to the doorpost. Or they don't want you to do it to the doorpost. Do it to the door, right? So you're going to bring him to the door, or you're going to bring him to the doorpost, the Ratzah, and pierce through. You're going to drill through. You're going to bore a hole. Adonai, the Lord's going to do it to Osno, to his ear. Going to drill a hole through his ear. Ba Marzea, with an awe. So basically, it's a nail. You're going to bore a hole through this guy's ear and drill and drive it into either the doorpost or the door. This is pretty serious stuff here, right? What a way to get your ears pierced. And that's how they did it when I was young. I watched the girls do that. They'd put something back behind their ear and take whatever that nail thingy was and drill a hole. Do you remember that, Donna? That's how she got hers pierced when she was young. I remember those girls doing it and me thinking, those girls are crazy. That's how it used to be done. So he's getting his ear pierced. You're going to stick him to a door by Avdo. And his servant, going to be drilled through his servant and stuck to the door. And he's going to be his servant, Le'olam. He's going to be a servant forever. From that point on. There'll never be a time when this guy does not work for that man. Okay, so here's the translation of verse 6. And his Lord will bring him to the judges, to the Elohim, and to the door or doorpost, and his Lord will pierce his ear with a nail, if you will, and he, the servant, will be his, the Lord's, servant from then on. Pretty straightforward. Here's a note I put in here. Devarim, or Deuteronomy 15:17, says that the nail will be driven through the ear into the door. It does not speak of the doorpost, which I just thought I'd let you know that one place says it can be one or the other, and the other place doesn't even mention the other. Here's another note I put in. A man had to really love his wife and kids if he was willing to let someone nail his ear to a doorpost and become a servant for the rest of his life. This law also stopped a Hebrew man from collecting sex slaves and from producing servants of his own from them. You see what's going on? He wasn't bringing the woman to the man so that he could breed new slaves. This kept that from happening, if you will. Even Ezra pointed out that the ear piercing was not to take place unless and until a man made a public confession of his love. It doesn't say that, but okay. The gods of those words, even Ezra thought that the term the gods was to be understood as the judges because they represented God's law on earth. However, the Bible calls unjust, ungodly kings, rulers, princes, and tyrants gods. So I disagree with even Ezra. He is right in that this verse is referring to the judges. Obviously, I agree with that. But not because they execute God's law. Instead, it is the judges because they are the kings, rulers, princes, and yes, sometimes tyrants over the people of Israel. Rulers and men of renown, as I said, were called gods. Not the God, but gods with a little g, if you will. They didn't actually do that kind of thing in Hebrew, but you get it in English. Many cultures of the biblical period met at the city gates to discuss and execute matters of law. To have a gate or door, which is the same word in Hebrew, there must first be posts for the gates/doors to hang on. As time went on, these meetings were more often held in buildings erected specifically for that purpose, and it was there that this event would take place. Of the word forever, Rashi, the Mechilta, and the Babylonian Talmud in Kiddushin 15a all believe that from now on, or uh, forever on lasted, anyway, now on or forever, whichever way, le'olam, lasted until the year of Jubilee. No doubt because the Hebrew servant was to be set free on the 6th year and or at the Jubilee. But by this logic, there is nothing in Judaism that should have lasted beyond the first Jubilee. Forever is forever, people. This is an exception to the rules of release, pure and simple. In other words, he's forever. He doesn't get set free on Jubilee. Okay. Because they saw it, instead of seeing it as an exception to the law, they saw it as being in conflict with the law. And so they didn't like the idea of a Jew becoming a servant for the rest of his life, and they made something up. That's what it really boils down to. Okay, so in verse 7, literally it says, and if sellman, daughter he to maid servant, not shall go out as go out the manservants. So, he, and if ye mekor, and if he sell, it's to sell a daughter. In other words, to betroth her. See, we think of, oh my God, he sold his daughter. No, he betrothed her. If you wanted to marry a woman back in this world, you had to pay. When they came to the parents' house, they brought sheep and goats and cows and fine linen and stuff like that. These were the gifts of Mohar. They brought them there, and then they would make a deal with the parents for the daughter. You literally bought her. But what was that purchase? It was her dowry. That stuff belonged to her, not the parents. Although some of it would go to the parents, on the side, a way to grease the wheels, if you will. But the deal itself, that stuff was for the purpose of taking care of the bride. So there was a purchase here. Then it says ish, which is a man, as opposed to a woman. It's really all it means. It's often the word used for husband, because he was a man. Then it says et bito, his daughter, the daughter as opposed to a son, female as opposed to a male. Le ama, if he sells her to be a maid servant. In other words, if the father is selling this woman into indentured servitude, his daughter into indentured servitude. By the way, the men in this world had the right to sell their wife, their wife, and their children into indentured servitude. Again, this is a 6-year maximum thing. They can't go further than that. So if he decides to sell her into indentured servitude, it was his low, so there's the negative article. Tet says she will not go out. She will not leave that place. Ketzet, the same as leaving ha'avodim, as the male servant. She does not leave in the same way that the male servant leaves. Okay, so the translation then is, and if a man sell his daughter to be a maid servant, she shall not go out as men servants go out. So obviously there's going to be more to this, because there has to be some explanation. Sell his daughter. Those words, Rashi and the Mechilta believe this verse was about a minor girl, not a girl of marrying age. I doubt that seriously, but I'm sure it happened. Maid servant. The Sephorno and many others attempt to connect the idea of selling the girl to betrothal, because I can't imagine that she's just being sold into indentured servitude. But this is why this is way off course, as the girl was sold into indentured servitude, not betrothal. We have to keep that straight here. Then in the words, go out as men servant. Rashi attempts to connect the idea of going out as men servants to them being set free because of the loss of a tooth or an eye, or because of the seventh year or the Jubilee. However, men servant go out free, owing nothing, with nothing but the clothes on their backs. This will not be so with a female Hebrew. There's going to be something different about how she goes out. So we get to verse 8. If evil in eyes lord her, that not betroth, and the ransom to people foreign, not dominion, to sell her in deceit he with her. Okay. So im means if, ra'ah, if evil, this is bad, physically as of an animal, bad cattle, bad waters, it's wickedness, it's evil, it's a manner of thinking and acting, especially nauseous, hurtful and evil, hurtful things, envious, you know, deformed in the face. When you deform your face in rage, they call that evil. You deform your face and yell at your kids, you are being biblically evil, evil. And everyone's sitting there going, oh, crikey, I did that. Yeah, we all have, but that's evil. Then it says, be'ene, if evil in eyes, to flow out in water. So the idea of eyes, the word comes about from because water comes out of them. They're a fountain, if you will. Adoneha. So if her Lord, if this guy who has purchased her has an evil eye. Now, you have to understand that what I'm about to read you from the sages, it's because the sages, the ones in particular that I'm going to bring up, they did not speak Hebrew. They weren't, I know this because they were not familiar with the simplest of Hebrew idioms. Some of you have heard this idiom before. If somebody has an evil eye, you already know what this means, right? But wait till you hear what they say. Asher, which means that. Lo, so there's your negative article. Ya'ada, betroth is the words. To point out, to define, to appoint, especially a place, a time, to a spouse, a wife, or concubine, because it's done at an appointed time. The hefdah and the ransom. It's the payment for redemption is what the word, that's what you need to know about that word. Le'am, to people. A people so called from their being collected together of a single race or tribe, a family, relative. So we can, I've said it before, we can be a people as in we are Americans. So that can encompass all the different uh, colors, creeds, religions, and all of that that you find in this country. We are all a people because we are all Americans. And you can break that down and say we're people because over here we're black, we're people because over here we're Japanese, because over here we're Chinese, or whatever. Though that would be considered a people too. But you're also a people because you're the Allen family. It's something that connects, you got to think of it that way. It's something that connects a group of people together, and that makes them a people. So you could be a people just because you're Jewish. You could be a people just because you're Orthodox Jewish, as opposed to those people who are conservative Jews, right? It's just that something that ties you together. But in this case, it's Nahri, foreign, stranger, someone from another country, someone from another people, right? Lo Yim Sho. He does not have dominion. He does not have authority or the power or the rule. Lemahara. He doesn't have the power, the authority, or the rule to sell her to a foreign people. Bevido. In deceit he, it's the word is cover. You got to think of it something that is done fraudulently, that's done covertly, it's done under the cover of darkness, under the cover of secrecy, under the cover of whatever, you know. verbs of covering, hiding, and hiding are often applied to fraud and perfidy. What's perfidy? Fraud. And then it says va, with her, so he's dissing with her. So here's your translation. If her Lord is stingy, if he has an evil eye, that's the Hebrew idiom. If you say someone has an evil eye, you're saying that they are stingy. Maybe even that they're greedy. Lord is stingy. That he does not betroth her, he has dealt deceitfully with her. He will redeem her. He has no power to sell her to a foreign people. Okay. Many sages attempted to develop some kind of apologetic connecting between sold as a maidservant with being betrothed. Because these sages did not speak Hebrew. They didn't know the simplest of Hebrew idioms. And so now they're reading this stuff literally. And because they're reading it literally, trying to get away from the idea of this woman was sold into indentured servitude, and now the man can't sell her to a foreign place. If a woman is sold, it's got to be betrothal, right? No, this is indentured servitude. So they missed the Hebrew idiom concerning a man who was so stingy that he wouldn't betroth the woman because he wanted more money out of it. So here's a note I wrote. This law also ensures